One of the other things we had talked about before was your involvement in the Human Rights Committee. I know you're very involved in that. Can you talk about some of the achievements that you had been involved in with that committee?
Well, I think back up a little bit. My inspiration for involvement in the human rights effort came through Roman Mayfield. And Roman and I, again, it was working an election. He and I were the chair and co-chair for the Everett site. And we set up there, and this was back when everybody was getting laid off. It was back in 1969, I believe it was, 69 or 70. And we sat in the Everett Hall all day long, something like 12, 14 hours, kept the polls open, and we had like 12 people voted all day. So we had a lot of time to talk. And so Roman gave me a lot of his history, and very inspirational. He hired in prior to any person of color being allowed to join the union. This was back when they were actually, the Constitution prohibited their membership, and he joined in and supported the union, supported the strike, started in 1948, and every strike until he was unable to function anymore. And he was an inspiration for that. So I got involved in human rights actually by default as far as being the chairman, because I was the administrative assistant to Tom Baker, and that position had historically been chaired the Human Rights Committee. And so I became the chair of that. And one of the accomplishments, I mean, there's many things we did as a Human Rights Committee that I think we could be proud of, but the one thing that really stands out is when someone found a picture in a wall at a building over at Boeing, and it had African-American Rosie of the Riveters that had signed the picture. And so I looked at it and I said, well, you know, it'd be neat if we could find these women. So we did basically a worldwide search and ended up finding one woman still alive and somebody we could identify off of that picture. And we brought them here. We had Boeing fly them in from the East Coast, basically, and honored them, you know, as Rosie the Riveters, and did an educational piece so that other people understood that all Rosie the Riveters weren't white. You know, there were other ethnic groups that were involved in that war effort.
If I remember through that effort, there was the one woman that was flown out from Pennsylvania, but there were also a number of Rosies, African-American Rosies locally that joined in that celebration.
They did, and that was the one thing that came out of this that was very satisfying, is once we started looking for those women in the picture, a lot of others came out, you know, that we didn't know about that were still living in the area. We found members of a Boeing all-black female softball team. We found any number of Rosies. I think we had 14 or something like that at a little dinner we had for them, and presented them all with roses, and made quite a celebration out of it. So it really turned out better than we had hoped.
What was the first strike, Ron, that you were involved in, and what type of activity were you involved in then?
It was a 1977 strike, and I was on the council at that time, and all the council people were strike captains, picket captains, and I was in the Everett facility, and Joe Marie Schultz and I were the only two picket captains up there, and I did one shift and she did the other. Sometimes we rotated night and day. And through the entire strike, we essentially had two picket captains. It was me and Joe Marie. And so we worked every day of the strike. And the only days I didn't work as picket captain is when I had picket duty, and my picket duty was down as a renting plant. So on those days, I got a replacement for my picket captain duties and did my picket strike down, or picket picketing down in the Renton plant.
Do you see any difference between the early strikes you were on and the more recent strikes?
We're a lot better organized. In those days, we had Mother's cookies and bologna sandwiches, and that was the entire thing we had for the picketers to eat while they were on strike duty. Now we have, strike kitchens, basically. And so that's one big improvement, but it's a lot more organized, and we're a lot better, have a lot better dispatching and so on.
So, what union offices did you run for?
Recording secretary of Local C, and ran for that twice and won the second time. Little side history on that. Importance, if you're going to run for anything, is to work at it and to make sure your home base votes. The first election I lost by 11 votes, and there were more than 11 people in my own shop failed to get out and vote. So in the next election, I lined everybody up and reminded them of that, and I won by 11 votes in the second time. Ran for district council 3 times, elected 3 times. I ran for secretary treasurer just before, a few years before I retired, and was unsuccessful. That was that was back in a kind of a dark area of our union. We'd had a president that had been convicted of stealing, basically, and it's cast a cloud over the whole union. So in 1992 and forward, we had very, very difficult time, with the solidarity in the union and so on, because just because of the actions of one person, it just absolutely basically destroyed the solidarity. So that's the reason I've always been an advocate that everyone in a position, that's, of trust from your members should take that, seriously, because it's very damaging when you don't do your job, period, or if you violate the trust of those members.